Hey scholars, Professor Denham here, giving you a video explanation of the application paper. I mentioned to some of you that I already made a video, but it was not uploading in Canvas. I made it yesterday. Today's Wednesday. I made it yesterday. It wasn't working. Anyways, here's another one going over the application paper. So I definitely recommend that you have the paper out in front of you, have the assignment document out in front of you that's on Canvas. I definitely recommend that you read through it thoroughly, read through it in detail before you watch this video. Otherwise, a lot of stuff doesn't make as much sense. And more importantly, it makes a lot more sense when you've already read it because then you have a context for what I'm referring to. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and pause the video, read it in detail, and then watch the video, pick it back up. So what you're doing is, I'm going to oversimplify it by talking about it like this. You're going to be writing about a communication experience and then defining a concept and then providing an application of that concept to that experience. So going through the assignment document, what you're going to do is choose a life experience, a communication experience that would be appropriate for this assignment, where you're going to be documenting something that happened in your life. It could be something that happened in the past, something that's ongoing, something that happened last week, a month ago, 6 years ago, or whatever. Think about like relationships you've had with your family members, friends, work experience, sports experience, internship experience, so on and so forth. So it could be almost anything. It could also be an indirect experience. So if you can't think of anything of your own, I definitely recommend that you write about your own experience. But if you can't think of something of your own, then you can write about an indirect experience, something that somebody shared with you. So hey, my best friend told me about this relationship they were in or this experience that they had, and that's relevant for this assignment. And if you still can't think of anything personal or directly or indirectly, then you can write about something from a TV show or a movie. But whatever you do write about, make sure it's something that you know really, really well. That way it's easier to write about. And then you are going to apply the concept to that. So the paper needs to be 2 to 4 pages, at least 2, no more than 4. If it were 4 pages plus 1 sentence on a 5th page, not a big deal. If it were 6 pages, I would only read 4 pages, and the other 2 pages I wouldn't read at all, and that would definitely affect your grade. If it were only 1 page, that would definitely affect your grade. So my advice to you, go for 3 pages. That should be your goal length of paper, is 3 pages. The writing should adhere to APA format, which is 12-point Times New Roman font with 1-inch margins all around. Make sure you set make sure you adjust your settings in whatever your word processing software that you're using so that it comes out to 12-point Times New Roman font with 1-inch margins, double spaced. Okay, so I definitely recommend that you follow this format to a T. Just follow this exact format. So here are the guidelines your paper should follow. I give you 5 steps. So one way to think about it is you have 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph is an intro. Have some sort of attention getting device for your reader. Just like in a speech, you want to have a good attention getter, you should also have a good attention getter in a paper, in a written format. Even in formal papers, it's still good to have attention getters. Provide a brief statement about why you chose the topic, and then a preview statement informing the reader of what to expect. So the introduction paragraph, very short, like a fourth of a page, a few sentences. And then you provide the background, provide a detailed description about the context of the communication experience, what happened, like the who, what, when, where, why, how, kind of, the details of what was going on. So it might be something like, oh, so I used to work at this restaurant and I was there for 2 years, and then I had a conversation with my manager, blah, 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 right? And then you basically provide the context, the background of this whole experience. But the background should also be a fairly brief paragraph, longer than the introduction, but not 2 pages. So I've had some students write tons of information, tons of detail about the background, and then a very small amount of information about the concept in the application. It's easy to write about the background because you're not really incorporating any course concepts. You're just saying what happened. In those instances, the papers get pretty low grades because you're not really demonstrating that you understand the concept. You're just writing about something that happened. So the background should be pretty brief, but detailed enough to give me to explain the scope of what you experience, or like if it's a movie, provide the details of the movie. And then the concept. So the concept will also be a paragraph, a much longer paragraph, maybe a couple paragraphs. It's up to you. So you want to be using your textbook as the primary source from where you got the information. You're going to choose one concept, only one concept, so not more than one. That means not two, and not three, not four, not five. And I'm strategically emphasizing that because of students in the past, I have the same kind of assignment, and then they end up writing about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 concepts, which in some cases actually brings down their grade because then they're not able to focus on any one particular concept, and they just talk too much about, they're covering too much information and not going deep. So the list of concepts to choose from are on page 2. I give you a variety of choices from chapters 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. So one way to go about choosing, a lot of students say, like, well, how do I know what to choose? Well, we've already covered all of these concepts either in class or they were in your assigned readings. So as you look at these, kind of ask yourself which ones stood out to you a lot as you heard them talked about in lecture, as you read about them in the textbook, as you studied your notes, as you studied these various topics for the midterm exam, and so on and so forth. Which ones really stood out to you that made you think of something? Or perhaps there was one of these particular concepts that we spoke about in class, and we had a long discussion about it, or we had a discussion about it, and maybe a student said something that maybe a light bulb went off. You're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So maybe that would be the way to choose a topic. Or you can go and look at each one, like just basically go to each topic. If you're completely lost, just go topic by topic or concept by concept in the textbook and look in your notes and just spend a very short amount of time, briefly review each one and make some notes, and then you kind of just see which one sticks, so to speak. And then from there, then you determine how you want to apply that to a life experience. Or you can first start by figuring out what you want to talk about with your communication experience, life experience. So one way to go about that would be brainstorming, right? You have like pen and paper and you write down family experiences, friendship experiences, work experiences, sports experiences, school experiences, so on and so forth, right? And then, or like movies, TV shows, current events, like try to figure out something that you're going to write about. Keep in mind that this is going to be this whole paper is only 3 pages, so it's not like this is a detailed research paper where you're going to be doing a deep, thorough analysis of a topic and looking deep into library research. It's a fairly easy paper in a way. It's only 3 pages. It's pretty short, but you want to be concise and get to the point. But very importantly, you want to be using your textbook as the source from where you got the information, depending on the topic. So I'll just give you an example. For chapter 1, there's two options: interdependence and competent communication. Communication competence, same difference. So with communication competence, our textbook has a very detailed overview of communication competence. It gives you more than enough information for you to be able to write about that in your paper. In other words, it gives you more than enough information for you to fully define and explain that concept in your own words, just using the textbook. So if you were to choose that, you're only going to be using your textbook. There's no need for you to be using other resources. You could, but if all you use was other resources and not your textbook, that would be a problem. For example, another example would be, let's say something like fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error is talked about in our textbook, so you want to be using our textbook, but you might also consult another source. Interdependence, back to chapter 1, interdependence is in our textbook, but there's a very small amount of information in our textbook. In class, we talked about it in detail. So if you were to choose a topic like interdependence, you could use the textbook, but then you're definitely going to want to find another source to help further explain it. You can kind of pull from some of the stuff that we talked about in the lecture, but you'd want to have some other outside expert source, or something like social exchange theory or repair tactics in chapter 8. Some of these topics, here's the thing, it's kind of like I'll leave it up to you in terms of using good judgment. If the textbook has more than enough information, like a ton of information about the topic, you don't really need to consult outside sources. But if the textbook either only has like one sentence or like a very small paragraph of that topic, we'll use the textbook, of course, and then use another source to help explain it. If you're not sure how to do that, sorry, I'm back. If you're not sure how to do that, you can ask questions, but you use your brain, use common sense. Like, hey, I need to provide a detailed explanation of this concept. You're only going to be writing, let's say a half a page, roughly half a page of writing defining the concept. If the textbook only has a tiny paragraph about the concept, probably not enough information. If the textbook has 3 pages on your concept, well, the textbook has more than enough information for you to fully define the concept. Make sure you're writing things in your own words. Don't just take large block quotes from the textbook and then put them in your paper. That's not you writing things in your own words. That's just you copying and pasting. That doesn't demonstrate any sort of level of intelligence. It demonstrates the ability that you know what a concept is and you know how to copy and paste. And trust me, I understand how complicated it can be sometimes to write things in your own words. And that really is the challenge, is for you to be able to contextualize something that you read in a textbook and explain it in your own words. You can use examples if you want, if that helps to explain the concept. But in section 3 of the paper, you're only writing about the concept. You're not writing about your own experience yet. I mean, you're not providing any sort of application of that concept to your experience. So to back up again, first paragraph, introduction. Very brief, like 2 sentences, 3 sentences, really short paragraph. Second section, background. You're just providing a context of what happened and what you're going to be talking about and so on and so forth. Part 3, now you're defining the communication concept, the textbook concepts, and you're providing a detailed, thorough explanation of that concept to demonstrate to the reader that you understand the concept. Part 4, that's the application. That's where you're providing an analysis, a detailed explanation of the degree to which this concept that you chose exemplifies your communication experience. So let's say it's something like social exchange theory, right? Social exchange theory, you've already provided a detailed explanation of social exchange theory in the concept section. So now you're in the application theory. Now you're in the application section, and you're just explaining how various components of social exchange theory exemplifies your own particular experience. Specifically explain how this concept, part A, explain how this concept illustrates your experience, provide specific and detailed examples in your analysis. So you would take different components of your life experience and then explain how those two things are connected, how your life experience, how the different components and characteristics of your life experience is connected to different components and characteristics of the concept. That's the application, the marriage between the two. And then that part C says, explain why it was useful to utilize that particular concept to illustrate your experience. So your life experience, the job that I had at that restaurant and the time when the manager said this to me and then this is how it affected me. Like, I chose that life experience to write about. And of all the concepts that I could have chosen from, I chose whatever, you know what I mean? I chose concept A. Why did I choose concept A? Explain why it was useful to utilize that particular concept to illustrate your experience. So you're sort of like making an argument there, sort of an implicit argument. You're implying, you're creating an account for why you believe those two things fit. There are several concepts you could have chosen from, but you chose one particular concept to write about your experience. Don't overthink this part. There's not one right answer. It's not like you're going to explain yourself and I'm going to be like, no, you're wrong. It's more like you're just basically, you're letting me in on your thoughts. You're letting me in. You're like, pulling back the curtains, if you will. Like, this is why I think this fits with my experience. There's not one right answer. So I just want to see, I kind of just want to know your thoughts. It should make sense. It should be logical. It should be reasonable. But it's not like math. It's not like there's one right answer. You're just telling the reader why you chose that concept to illustrate your experience. But again, keep in mind, the application section, this is not a 10-page paper. The application section is going to be probably around the same amount of length as the concept. One long paragraph, maybe two long paragraphs, and then that's the application section. And then you have the conclusion. Provide a summary of what happened, review your experience, the concept, any insights that you gained from analyzing your experience. Did it help you make more sense out of a situation? Did it seem like it made things better? Did it make you feel worse? Like just kind of, wrap everything up. So that's the paper. So I'm going to I'm going to explain a little more detail on some of the particulars. So when it comes to finding additional sources, in other words, let's say your whatever concept that you chose, if you're like, hey, the textbook only has a short paragraph, well, within that paragraph, oftentimes the authors will reference other sources. They provide a citation of a study, I'm pretty sure with let's say fundamental attribution error, or a variety of the concepts. They'll reference other studies. They have citations in there and they reference them. It'll be like Denham, Johnson, and Aguilar, 2012, right? There's the citation within the chapter, and then at the back of your textbook, where there's a references section, it says references, and it's several pages long, like 50 pages long, of all the citations that are in the textbook. The actual reference is provided at the end of the textbook in the references section, and it has the full reference. It has like all the authors' names, the year, the title of the article, the title of the book, the publication, all that information, so that you could potentially find that original source and look that up. Another option is, let's say it's something like interdependence. As I mentioned, interdependence, it's only briefly talked about in the textbook. There's just a very small section on it. I talked about it a lot in class. But then you might consult, let's say, the library resources. You could try utilizing the library databases, library resources. Or if you're doing an internet search, you want to make sure you're getting good scholarly research. So what I recommend is that you use Google Scholar. And Google Scholar it's different than regular Google. If you just go into Google and you type in interdependence, you might get something like 100,000 entries. I don't know, I'm just guessing. But if you go into Google Scholar and you type in interdependence, you might only get 10,000 entries, which is still a lot. But the point is, you get far fewer entries per search when you're using Google Scholar when it comes to scholarly topics, because Google Scholar is a more specific, focused, narrow search engine. It only shows you scholarly results, versus Google is like the World Wide Web, right? It's like everything on the web, versus Google Scholar is more focused and it just shows you scholarly resources. So Google Scholar, if you've never used it before, you should, specifically for school stuff. And I think it's google.scholar.com or scholar.google.com. I don't remember, but just type in Google Scholar in your search bar and it'll take you right to it. And oftentimes it'll give you a PDF of a source that you need, and sometimes it doesn't. But this is part of the research process. Again, this is not a research paper, but if all you need is like one source to help you explain a concept in more detail, it shouldn't take that long. It's not like you need 20 sources. You just need one, and you're not even writing that much about it. So everyone's going to be in a different boat. Some of you are going to be in the boat of like the textbook has more than information, or like the lecture helped a lot, and then there's a little bit in the textbook, and I found this one other source that helps me explain this. And then some of the concepts that we didn't talk a whole lot about in the class, and so you'll definitely have to, if it's a concept that we didn't really talk much about in class and there's not much in the textbook, then you definitely want to find an outside source to help explain it. So that's that. Make sure you keep things separate. I emphasize this so much because what oftentimes students will do is they provide the application section in the concept section, and then they don't even have an application section. They just have one section where they're combining the two, and basically that's not following directions. So part of doing well as a college student, part of doing well is in terms of writing papers, is following directions. So you might need to read the assignment document multiple times. When I was a grad student, I had assignment documents just like this. I've modeled the way I do things after my graduate professors. I would sometimes read the assignment instructions 10, 15, 20, 30 times because it was so specific. and I'm writing a 30-page paper, and there's just a lot to be done. The instructions were still fairly simple. It's just the work I had to do was a lot more than this, right? These instructions are in my opinion, fairly simple. They're very specific, but your work is only 3 pages. So that's that. Feel free to ask questions if you have them. You can send me an email. And if I get 10 emails that all are asking the same kind of question, then I might just send out another video message, audio message, or something like that, addressing some things. But the other thing is very important. You definitely have to submit the paper as a Word or PDF document to Canvas in the appropriate assignment module. Failing to do so will, in all likelihood, lead to a 0 on the assignment. So the deadline is Sunday the 9th, no later than 11:59 p.m. And as you know, with my grading policy, I allow late work for partial credit. So the latest that you can turn in for any credit would be Wednesday night, which would be, what is that? The 12th, I think. Yeah, so Wednesday night, the 12th by 11:59 p.m. for partial credit. If you're unsure of the grading policies, review the syllabus and, of course, review the PowerPoint video and PowerPoint, or the YouTube video, and then the PowerPoint little lecture thing that I have on my grading policy. I've talked about this in class, and of course, it's on our Canvas page. That's that. Do make sure that you are using correct grammar, spelling, all that kind of stuff. Start off with an outline. You're not turning in an outline, you're just turning in a final draft. But I say start off with an outline because pretty much all good writing, almost all writers, academic writers, non-academic writers, all kinds of writers, they begin with an outline. When you're building your paper, whether it's 3 pages or 300 pages, you start with an outline. You know, the outline for a 3-page paper, a lot easier than an outline for a 300-page paper. But nevertheless, it simplifies the process. It makes it easier to write, and it generally leads to much better quality, higher quality papers. Definitely avoid excessive direct quotes from the textbooks. The fewer the better. The rule of thumb is the fewer the better, right? If you know, if you're looking at a direct quote from the textbook, the question you got to ask yourself is like, if you're thinking of just copying and pasting it, why? Like, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I feel there's no way for me to change the wording and put it in my own words, or you just don't understand it? And if you don't understand it and you don't know how to explain it in your own words, well, then maybe you should just try harder. I mean, it might not sound like the nicest thing to say, but try harder. Because when you try harder and you're just looking at it and you're like, you're using it's like mental exercise. It's mentally strenuous to look at something that might be kind of complex when it's in the written form in the textbook, and then I have to put it in my own words. It's hard. Maybe take a break. Maybe you're like, I don't know how to put this in my own words. Well, maybe for now, as you're writing the paper in the rough draft form, for now you can just do a copy and paste, right? Or not copy and paste, but have a direct quote, highlight that quote, and then type in the notes like, write in my own words or something like that. And then when you come back to your paper the next day and you're working on it, hopefully you're working on it in a sort of a staggered sort of approach where you're not just writing the whole thing in one sitting, you're writing it in multiple sittings. When you come back to it another time later in the day or the next day, now try to write in your own words. You've had time to let your brain sort of digest everything. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's helpful. And then again, it's very important that you submit it correctly to Canvas because it needs to be checked through Turnitin. So in other words, I won't accept it if you email it to me, or let's say you attach a document in the comment section or the note section within the assignment module. I won't accept that as well for either. So it has to be submitted to the proper way through Canvas, the Canvas assignment module, because it's going to be checked through Turnitin. And if it's not done that way, in all likelihood, it won't be accepted at all, leading to a 0. And I'm pretty sure you don't want that. Make sure you include a references page. In all likelihood, the reference page is going to be, for most of you, it'll just be our course textbook. And then for others, you might have the course textbook plus 1 or 2 other sources. Sometimes students will, for this assignment, they'll have the textbook and then 2 other sources. Like I said, you're not required to. It just depends on the concept and what exactly you need to be able to write about the concept. So I think that's everything. Make sure you proofread really well. And I think that's about it. Hope you're all doing well. I'll talk to you later.